Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Angel of Words podcast, where your stories are heard. I am your host, Angel of Words, and before we get started, don't forget to punch that like button, subscribe, follow us on all your favorite podcast platforms, and if you want to leave a donation to the Angel of Words podcast, Cash App AOWNYC. Now, today on the Angel of Words podcast, we have the host of the brand new podcast, Rise Up HR, Miss Brenda Sabater. Hello, Miss Brenda. How are you today?
Hey, Angel. I'm doing great.
Thanks for joining us today on the Angel of Words podcast. It's a pleasure to have you. Now, you have a fantastic podcast, which I think that everyone should take a listen to, especially if you're in a situation right now where you're trying to go and find employment, keep employment, and search for something that is going to empower you and make you feel alive, like passionate about something. Now, how did Rise Up HR come about, and what's the purpose of the podcast? Could you let our listeners know?
Absolutely. Well, first, thank you so much for inviting me to your show. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm very honored. So Rise Up HR came out to be because of my experience in human resources. So I've been doing human resources for over 15 years, and it wasn't so easy, right? Just being from an outside looking in. So before I even started in human resources, there were so many areas of opportunities. I mean, getting treated like a human being. Let's just start with that one. And then I started my career as a recruiter, and as I started continue to grow my level and understanding of recruitment, different HR strategies, talent acquisition, then I started growing a little bit more love for the HR arena. And that meant, training and development, learning and development, which I don't like calling it training too much because you train animals, not people. And
Yes.
And so there were other facets of HR like benefit administration, all this other stuff. And there's always been a stigma attached to human resources that we're paper pusher, right? We're just taking orders from everybody in the organization, and we have to make sure that it gets done, which is really what we need to do. But at the same time, we have a responsibility, a strategic responsibility with the business, as well with the human capital, to help build and develop people so they can, be better employees of the organization. And so they become more resilient and empowered to grow or grow out of the organization, right? You're doing a good job when you have developed someone so well that they either stay and continue to grow, or realize, thank you so much for all the training and the resources. And while that may sound like something you don't want to hear, but you have to also pat yourself in the back, like you did something right? And then of course they'll find themselves way back to the organization. So Rise Up HR really focuses on multiple facets. One is really talking to other HR thought leaders who've had similar experiences to me when, for starting out to with human resources, or someone who's not in the human resources arena has experienced some, difficulties with communication and getting things done, right? The other facet is helping other small businesses understand what human resources is all about and how to develop their human resources leadership. So we focus a lot on HR leadership, communication strategies, business strategies, employment strategies, talent acquisition strategies, but more so to really be able to understand that we're all humans. We're going to make mistakes, and we all need to be compassionate and empathetic. And at sometimes not everybody can function into a robotic mechanic type of way. And so it's be able to communicate effectively, develop policies and procedures that's going to be more inclusive, not exclusive. So a lot of topics like diversity and inclusion, unbiased conscious, we talk about these things on the podcast. So it's very, very diverse. I mean, I've had veteran entrepreneurs.
And you're talking to veterans, actually. That's what I want a lot of people to know. These are people that have been in this position for years. These aren't, HR generalists. No disrespect for them. They'll get to your levels eventually, if it's something they're passionate about. But you're talking to people that have been in the industry a long time and have been in that position where they're hiring talent, where they're scouting talent, where they're headhunting, whatever it is that they're doing, consulting. You're not talking to just like the average Joe in human
No,
resources?
no, we're talking to civic leaders, government leaders, C-level executives, senior managers as well, and those who are aspiring to be in HR or in the management role or in a leadership role, because you don't have to be in HR to practice good HR best practices, right? And
Yeah.
so this is really the main point of, understanding what human relations is and understanding, yes, policy and law, employment law are very important, but also, let's put back human and human resources, which is my slogan. And
I like that.
let's challenge the status quo, because back in the days things were done differently, and so communication was always top down and not crisscross, or there was no feedback environment. It was more of, I'm going to tell you how it is and you have to follow suit, right? Instead of receiving that feedback from different types of, departments, people, because I love diversity. And while I like to hang out with like-minded people, I also like to expand my horizon by hanging out with other folks with different diverse backgrounds and ideologies, because then we can exchange feedback and be able to develop and grow from that. And that's what I love about this podcast. So we get veterans who come on the show who talk about their transition from, the military. I'm talking about 20 years ago while they were in the military, and then they talk about their career path transitioning into corporate America, and they find that being an entrepreneur has been more successful to them because they have more control of who they are. They have control of their own schedule. They have control of, their pipeline dream, et cetera, versus, being in corporate America, there was some difficulties and challenges and adaptation that wasn't quite there for them yet. And so they bring that information into our show, because if a company, a Fortune 500 company or a brand new company who wants to expand and develop, their workforce to create an environment that's more welcoming to veterans, they need to understand what they need in order for them to sustain a career and be resilient and grow. So we bring up these topics. We even bring up post-traumatic stress disorder. Not to say that all veterans suffer from this, but it's important to have these conversations and talk about these opportunities where can be very missed in organizations.
Now, you have an interesting philosophy. You said that telling someone that they can do anything can be dangerous. Now, could we talk about like career pathing and direction? Because I know that's an issue that I had in working in the corporate world, working in the private industry, public industry, not-for-profit organizations. And, I wasn't feeling any of that. I always felt like I was a fish out of water. And it's because, they tell you, your parents tell you, oh, go get a job, blah, blah, blah. Or they tell you can do anything. And it's like, you feel like, no, that's very dangerous rhetoric to be spewing to people. And I want to know why you feel that way.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that question. So I was born and raised in the Bronx, grew up in Harlem, and
don't be fooled by the rocks that she's got,
and very proud of it. But I'll tell you that at some point, and I guess that's another, a segment on this show that we can talk about. But growing up, I was believed, growing up in the public school system, I was always believed that I can be everything I want. Anything that I set my mind to, I can be, which is not bad. I think that these are great foundations to have, to believe in yourself, especially having parents who believed in me. My mom constantly ingraining me, you can be this, you can be a lawyer, you can be a doctor, you can be a fireman, you can be, whatever it is that you want. But what was missing in all this is setting up smart goals and a plan to attain those specific things. Like, for example, a teacher will tell their students, you can be a teacher like me. And aren't there other career paths that may be interesting, right? And so I love the fact that there's career days. I think there should be more career days in school where they bring different types of folks from different industries in construction, right? They never mention career path in construction, especially for women. So there's a lot of opportunity or missed opportunity for more females in that industry. And I come from that industry of construction, right? So there are plenty of opportunities for females to really endeavor career path in construction, or nursing for young men, who are trying to figure out. So we've been told, oh, nursing is for women, right? So we put this gender identity and role crisis, in our spiel, in our rhetoric, which makes it really confusing for folks who want to endeavor on different career paths. So career path needs to be very specific, very diverse driven, but keep it narrow to a sense. Like, if you're going to tell somebody they can be anything they want, be very specific onto that roadmap, right? And and analyze their skill sets and have conversations with them. And because what happens is we can sometimes set some people up for failure and disappointments if we're not there to back them up, if we're not there to support them. And I find that happening a lot, especially when I was growing up, to some of my peers. They were just misguided. And so of course, I developed that curiosity thing where I'm like, I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to do internships and things like that. I'm not going to go to school right away because I definitely need experience. So we're taught to jump into the university, and what happens? People go into school and never, ever work in whatever they study. They find that they're doing something else they like based on some job that they took while they were studying. And so it's very important to be able to give people different roadmaps for their success. Not everyone's going to be successful the same way, but giving them guidance and direction and telling them, this is what you need. If you want this career path, this is what we're going to do. Lay it out. Set SMART goals. Be specific. Set a timeline. When do you want to attain this? Okay, you've done this, been there, done that, then move on to the next, and we're going to take it. So you can be whatever you want, but you have to be very specific how long it's going to take, because I think telling someone to be a lawyer, the first thing is like, oh, that's so many years in school, right? So already you're taking away their curiosity,
their ambition,
and interest.
yeah. And I feel like that's something that happens a lot in communities of color, low income communities. And I'm really, if I find it disconcerting, because I feel like it drives people away from something that they may be passionate about, and not only that, good at. So as an HR person, can you spot this and have these conversations with people? Like, let's say somebody has a job that they don't like, right? They come to you, they're like, you know what, I'm not really feeling this. Is it HR's role? Do you think it should be HR's role to step in there and have these conversations with their employees?
I think it's definitely HR's responsibility to be able to understand their workforce by having continuous conversations with their team, with their workforce, but at the same time with their direct managers. So, what HR does and what I have done in the past, and what I do with my clients, is I'm the liaison. I'm the HR business partner where, yes, I'm going to hear the conversation from an employee who's going to talk to me about their frustration, who's concerned about their future, who doesn't have the adequate amount of resources and time dedicated for their career path, or because their managers don't pay attention to them, or whatever the case may be. So I in turn create these conversations over time, and I ask them, where do you see yourself 3 or 4 years from now? I don't ask the 5-year, 10-year conversation. Not anymore. That doesn't happen.
Why do you think that question is even relevant? Why isn't it a shorter time span? Like, where do you see yourself 3 months from now? Maybe they hate that job so much and they just want to express their feelings to somebody. I mean, I don't, I'm just curious, why is it always the 2-3 year plan? A lot of human beings, they don't remember what they ate last week, what I'm saying?
I hear you, Angel. And
I'm just curious, I'm not even joking.
No,
I
know this is a great question. So, and I'm going to answer it. So,
okay.
So we need to definitely focus on tactical goals, which are short-term goals. Long-term goals are great, but you need to really have these strategies, these short-term strategies, in order for you to attain these long-term goals. And so for me, while the 5 to 10 year mark is not so much irrelevant, it's almost like looking at it like, okay, I'm going to get there eventually, but build these small pockets of goals, these milestones, and check them off as you go. Number one, you're going to feel more empowered and more great about your accomplishments, right? Because now you're going to get to milestone number 1, and now you're just a few steps away from milestone number 10. Right. And so so if you have these conversations with your workforce, with your employees, if an HR or a learning and development personnel, once they have these conversations with their staff, is to really lay out on a piece of paper, a career path. Like, okay, do you want to improve on your sales? Well, you have to make more phone calls. This is what we're going to do. Create a plan, write out a plan, and set a specific timeline when you want to achieve that. And then now you're going to add some challenges throughout that journey, because what people need to understand, your career is a journey. It's not a destination. And it can go in either direction or in so many directions, depending on the environment, the economy, your motivation, and who you talk to. So it's important that you get connected with a mentorship program. I had someone on my show talking about mentoring, which is going to be launched tonight. Mentoring and sponsoring and coaching, and understanding the difference between the three, which is so important for other leaders to be able to develop other leaders through that career path, through that leadership and learning and development path, which talks about different milestones, like short-term outcomes, and then looking at the long-term path. But it's a journey. And I think that it's very important to look at the short term, not the long term. It's important to look at both, but people change all the time. People are not even in jobs for more than 12 to 18 months nowadays. They're just job hopping. And it's because people want to challenge themselves and going to different places and just gain more experiences. So.
Now, you also mentioned that, you're Latina. So I remember you mentioning that Latinos are not getting enough diverse information on these situations. That since we don't get this kind of information, we have like these strict ideologies of career paths that this needs to start diversifying a little bit. Why do you feel that way?
Well, I feel that, some Latino communities are at a little disadvantage depending what school they're in, depending what programs or however they're funded. And so they get different resources. For example, some of my good friends went to Haku and they're from the Bronx. And I'm like, you went to Haku? And I didn't get to meet them until I traveled to Washington, D.C. and network with a whole different type of, variety of market. And then I'm having different conversations with different people, and we're all in the same age group and we're connected with similar people, but out in Washington, D.C. And they said, oh, you didn't know about Haku? I went to this school. I'm like, well, I went to this school. I went to a parochial school. I didn't get that information. So, yeah. It's important for, these programs to do a better job in doing outreach in different inner cities and different schools and diversify the schools. I felt that being part of a parochial school from like the 10th to the 12th grade, we were overestimated. I don't know. Oh, they're parochial. They're smart. They got it. They don't need all these resources. They have money. I actually got a sponsorship. I got a scholarship to go to school. So I needed that resource. I was their market, but I didn't get it. Right. And so I think it was a good friend of mine that I grew up who was more or less in the same type of mentality of, career pathing, who told me about an internship right up the street from where I lived. It was called Eastside House Settlement. And they gave us an internship. So we were in different schools, different CUNY schools, doing internships after school, whether that was filing paper or working for a law office, whatever the case may be. And they took all of us at the end of our internship program to Washington, D.C. And I was mind blown. I was like, wow, I didn't know about this in the 9th and 10th grade, but it was again through networking and being curious and asking those questions. Like, I need to get plugged in. I need to do something. And I tell you, that was the reason why I moved to Washington, D.C. in 2002, because of that internship. Right. So we need more resources like that in our school, in our inner city school systems, in our public school system, in our charter school system, as well as in the parochial school system. Another problem I see is that sometimes our students are underestimated in our inner school. So that's why they say, become a teacher. It's only 4 years. Quick. or be an EMT, a paramedic, or whatever the case may be. The career path is short. You can get an associate's and boom, get into that career path. And life is not about shortcuts or the easy route. Yes, it's a career path and it's a great and noble job, but don't underestimate us as Latinos or even Blacks. We're here to absorb everything we can. I come back to the Bronx and I see folks that I went to school with, and we were offered some more or less the same resources, but they were not given the opportunity because they were quote unquote underestimated. Maybe they didn't see that same enthusiasm as I showed, right? Maybe they didn't have that family dynamic that pushed them, and they needed that from, the teachers or these organizations like Haku or Eastside Settlement. And so I felt when I came back in 2017 and realized, wow, we went to school together. And then just to see some of the journey they decided to take on is very sad. But, at the same time, it makes me wonder, what can I do to give back to the community? And so, I try very hard to help other folks with their resumes and with their interviews, and I don't get paid for that. I just do that willingly to help out and make sure.
It's great that you do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's really great that you do that. And
Thank
another
you.
thing that I know that you're interested in doing is, how do we close the gender gap of pay? What's going on with that? What's HR doing about that, man? That's the biggest. That's
God.
the hot topic, man.
That is definitely.
We don't have our fighter anymore, the notorious RGB. You know what I mean? So it's like, what's happening right now?
Well,
why is that? Why is that gap still existing? How can we close it? What can HR do? What's their role in that?
HR can do but so much, in the sense of, I think one of the misconception that HR can do it all, right? And so it's important to create collaboration. That's really the main point of my podcast, is building a community of collaboration, and being able to speak up and let them know men and women deserve equal pay. If there's a SHRO, for example, a Chief Human Resources Officer, and there's a CFO, which for me, they're in the same line of command in chief, right? So yes, they deserve equal pay. And that's just a very basic example. But still, we're still fighting for that 15, 20%, even 50% pay difference. And we're on the same level of education. And now we're more aggressive in getting onto the same level of education, of experiences, of opportunities. And so the gap is getting there. It's just not close enough. And I think the difference is what we're doing in our school systems. It really starts from that. Elaborating more on the STEM program, science, technology, engineering, mathematics.
You know me. I don't know if you've seen the podcast, but I've done a lot of STEM. That's like my thing,
Yes,
I hopped on that at least 5 or 6 episodes this year, because I feel like, there's I don't feel like I've done the research. There's like 16.8 million jobs available. Latinos are 1%. I think less than 1% of those jobs of that works, And that's a problem for me,
There's such a huge dichotomy when it comes to STEM and the opportunities and the education around that. There are great organizations that are really focusing on these programs. I just don't think there are enough of it. And so...
Well, it's expensive. It's expensive, Brenda. STEM is a little expensive.
Well, actually, during the coronavirus...
Yeah, no, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm sorry. During the coronavirus, there have been courses for, I guess, elementary students taking coding programs and, cyber technology programs. So we're getting aggressive, and Microsoft has built out, a different community for free throughout the pandemic. For I think it was around the summertime, they had different cohorts for different grades for them to do coding. And I remember when I saw this, I advertised it. Microsoft did this. Some other programs did this, but this is the one that came on top of mine. But you're right, Angel. We don't have enough of this program. We don't have, and it is expensive, but it's more expensive not investing in your child's academic endeavor. It's more, if we're going to buy them a PlayStation, Why don't you take that money and invest it in their education? It's going to pay itself back 10,000 fold, right? Get them into different after school programs, get them into, I love sports. I'm not an athlete, but
Yeah.
let's diversify our after school
You are in your mind,
activities.
you're an athlete in your mind.
Yeah, I'm not gonna run, whatever 1,000 dash, etc. I do it with the
Yeah.
business, but
Yeah.
I'm just, elliptical is fine for now. But you know what I mean? It's just, I think it's setting up that finance. So we need this. We need financial literacies in our school system, right? For our young minds and all the way in high school to maybe college, right? We need financial literacy for our families. Talking about investments, talking about opportunities for financial wealth, generational wealth. I just still believe there's so much growth and opportunities in these topics of conversations to build generational wealth. I think, in our Latino community, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, we're confusing the word being humble. Humble, yes.
Ooh, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, what do you mean? I think being humble is great. When
Yes.
you're successful, give back quietly, don't brag about it, don't be
Yeah.
showing off, flashing out, whatever.
I totally
That,
disagree with you. I'm gonna just be super
right?
boastful. I'm gonna be just throwing hundreds of dollars like 6ix9ine on the streets. That's me, I gotta do things grandstanding style. But yes, what do you?
But
It's not your style. I get it.
oh,
To each his own.
it's definitely not my
Yeah.
style, and by
Okay.
no means I'm criticizing it, but I'm just trying to define provide the definition of what humble is, right? And
Yes.
so being humble or being modest is like, oh, I don't want that promotion, or they're just they're not fighting enough, or the best way to describe it, I don't want to toot my own horn. Toot it. Toot your damn horn. When you're on an interview, be proud of your accomplishments. Is that opportunity to do that? If you're up for a promotion, toot your own horn. Don't be humble or modest about it. That's not the opportunity to be humble, right? So as Latinos, we're made to believe to be humble and thank God we have a job, and thank God we're working, and gracias a Dios we got un cuenta de banco, and whatever we have, we give it all, and so we need financial literacy in our society.
You know what's so crazy? You just said that, right? Because I remember when I worked in the corporate life, right? I had a friend, a really close friend who's still my friend now, and we were having a conversation. I was on my way out. I was already like, my head is out the door. I'm still here collecting a check. And, inside I felt bad because I'm like, yo, somebody could have this job that would excel and I'm holding them back. I got to really work hard to get out of this situation. But my friend has 2 kids. She's probably, she was probably going to be in that company for a while. She was good at what she did. And I thought that she was too humble. So I was like, look, there's an opening, there's already 2 people that resigned from this situation right here. This is a perfect job for you to ask the regional manager to be transferred to this location because you want to keep your good standing. Your production was dropping. We worked in sales. Your production was dropping. A space was opening up where the 2 top sales associates were retiring or moving to another state. I don't remember what the situation was. And I was like, you got to write an email to him. You got to let him know that you want this. Because you're going to be stuck in this level right now in obscurity. You got to go after it. And, I even wrote her the email and then, she sent it and, she got the promotion and, to this day, I still go to all her cool events because I'm the guy that got her the promotion.
She's very lucky to have you, and for you to be there to support her. You're gonna have to want your success to happen. You have to take the initiative yourself, and you're gonna have to want it that bad. And I think most people, like I know very good friends of mine who've been in the same company for 15 years. Yeah. And individuals with like 2 master's degree, I don't know how many certificates in the industry that we're
Yeah,
in.
just a bunch of accolades for no
Yeah,
reason.
just well, it's not for no reason. One,
Yeah,
people feel good about these accolades. They go after it, or
yeah.
for whatever reason they. So, for example, this person that I'm thinking about just goes to school because the company pays for it, but they're comfortable. They feel comfortable where they are. They're not comfortable. So
Is that
their
wrong though? Is
opportunity.
it wrong to feel comfortable where you are?
I think it's dangerous. It's very dangerous.
Why do you think it's dangerous? That's an interesting perspective. Wow.
Yeah, it is dangerous because you're not growing. You're not
Okay.
challenging yourself. One day that job, there's no such thing as job security. Look what's happening right now with COVID and all the companies that are shutting
Yeah.
down, downsizing. People who've been in the same company for 15,
Mm.
20 years are finding themselves back at dusting off their resume. And it was in a format that was like dated back in the 1990s, So they need to be able to go out there, even if they're not looking, go out there anyway and start interviewing. Um, I'm in positions right now where I'm interviewing different folks for different opportunities or just having conversations, and they can't have them. They're coming to me for, to help them with resume writing, with coaching and interviewing techniques. And it puzzles me sometimes why they want to, why? Because I'm such a risk taker. And I know that companies, while they may love you at that time being, you're indispensable. And it's dangerous to be comfortable at where you are. It's great to challenge yourself, take promotions and everything else, but it's also good to diversify your background. I mean, if I'm hiring someone for, let's say, a VP position, and this person was a senior director at a tech company for like 20 years, and that's all they did from like from right out of college to where they are in their senior level. But I look at someone who's also in the same capacity but has had background in IT, in hospitality, in food and beverage, or maybe even nonprofit. I'm more curious about this other person with a diverse background because they're going to come back
Yeah.
with some other mind blown strategy that's going to blow, us into another category in our revenue.
Oh, you
That's
would
who I'm
totally
looking
hire
at.
me then, I've had so many different types of jobs. I'm all
and
over the place.
and that we need to get out of that mentality where the job hopping, it's something that's going to continue to happen. And if you're overlooking that, I feel very sorry for these hiring managers who are very stuck in, oh, they're job hopping. Now I'm hopping. I'm not saying a person that's been in a job for 2-3 months and then go into another one. I'm talking about someone who's been in a job for 12 months here, 18 months there, anything that's like anywhere between 12 months to 2 years. That's experience. And maybe it was the company's fault that they had outgrown themselves in that organization. What is it that you have to offer to keep them engaged, and for you to also get your money's worth when you hire them because you have 2 years or less to keep them engaged and keep them growing and keep developing them professionally. So again, job hopping is not something to frown upon. It's something that you need to also feel good about when you're doing it, because you're taking risks, you're taking challenges. There are risks where people are just still in that old mindset and that past generation. Well, you know what, you're risky. You're a flight risk. I'm not going to do it. So they all appreciate someone who's at a company for 15 years, but for someone who's at a company for 15 years, my best advice is try to figure out other ways to make your wealth or your income or your happiness. And I know folks who've been in companies and they're not 100% happy, but it's safe. But it becomes unsafe when they start downsizing and they find themselves in a situation where they have to find a job. And that's the difficult part. That's going to be the most challenging part for them.
So you say to keep yourself fresh. I mean, let's say you're in a good situation somewhere, still never stop reading, let's say, industry magazines, never start trying to expand your horizons. Always try to keep yourself as sharp as possible, because you
Absolutely.
never know when things are going to hit the fan.
You
You
just
know?
never know. For example, for me in human resources, I have my certification in human resources, my PHR. Right now, I'm currently studying for my SHRM certification, which is the Society for Human Resources Senior HR. I've been thinking about this certification for years. It's just a hard exam, right? So I'm like,
Yeah.
do I want to sit down in front of a computer for 4 or 5 hours and take an exam? But the thing is what is it going to do for me in my career, my credibility? It's just going to make me a better practitioner. And so whatever it is, even I sign up for e-newsletter through the EEOC. So they let me know every update when it comes to COVID or paid family leave. These are New York policies for those who are tuning in, because I don't get to know everything like from California, but whatever's reflecting to my clients within the New York City area or Jersey or Connecticut, I'll start getting that news feed and I start learning from it and I grow from that. But, aside from that, dabble into different industries. So this is why I love being a consultant, because you get to dabble into construction, into hospitality, into IT, and different types of industries as well.
You're even doing restaurants as well, aren't you?
So
Kind
not
of.
so much, yeah,
Yeah.
not so much as
Because I'm like, how does,
before.
because, I mean, you're going to have a lot of work to do in restaurants. Everybody's always sleeping with each other. There's a lot of political incorrectness. I'm like, how's that working out for you? I was
Wait, Angel,
curious when I read that.
what do you mean? What do you mean? Hold on. You said sleeping with each other? If I heard correctly, I didn't hear that
Yeah,
correctly.
no, I mean, come on, it's the restaurant business. I spent 15 years of my life in the restaurant business, man. It's
Um,
a whole hot mess in there, you know. That's a place that needs a lot of HR training, let me tell you, man.
yeah, that's a very HR nightmare. But
Yeah, it is
that
an
goes.
HR nightmare, I could imagine.
I feel like some HRs are really good HR practitioners, but
Yeah.
because certain policies in the organization prevents them to expand their wings. So I've been in touch with other HR thought leaders who they've reached their max capacity as HR directors and realize, I'm not gonna be at my full potential here. There's so much room for change. And because of our stakeholders and the senior leadership team, they're not listening. I'm providing them with all the resources possible, the information, the data to appeal a change in the organization and how they go about things, but they're not doing it. So they actually become consultants for the organization, and then they get heard and listen and whatever. So it's kind of a weird dynamic. But when it comes to the restaurant business, I actually so I was a barmaid at one of the restaurants over in the Bronx. And I
Wow,
remember,
you're bold. You're a
yeah,
brave human being, yeah. You're
yeah,
like AOC,
I don't know what I was thinking, but it was fun. The tips was great. But I
Yeah.
remember we were hosting an event for like the local government, civic leaders in the area. And one of them tipped me $100 and whispered in my ear and said, "This is not your career path." And I was just serving drinks. I was just serving drinks. And this person said, this is not your career path. And it was like a pizzeria with a bar in the back. And they had like a private event with, I'm telling you, all this the civic leaders in the area. And this individual, and I never forget what
Sounds
he
like that
said.
place in Castle Hill. Was that in Castle Hill?
No, that was here in the Grand Concourse area.
Oh, okay. Oh,
Giovanni's,
okay.
I'll
No.
never forget it. So it's now called the G Bar.
Yeah. Is it really? Oh God, I love it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Gentrification, baby, at its best.
So I will never forget that experience. I actually started in the restaurant business, again as a barmaid,
Yeah.
as a
It's my
host,
favorite business. I'll
matron,
be honest. Out of all the businesses I've been, it is my
because
favorite.
it's fast paced. I mean,
Yeah.
I worked in Baltimore where I consulted with a few of the quick service restaurants, which is a lot
Mm-hmm.
different from the non-franchise restaurants, but still the same concept. It's fast paced, people are intertwining. I dealt with a lot of employee relations matter, harassment, quid pro quo. There was just a lot that I was dealing with,
Yeah.
right? And so
Did it drive you into becoming an HR person?
It
Was
just
that one
made
of the
me
motivations?
that and the you know,
Yeah.
all these the issue is what's being communicated with these
Yeah.
managers and the training.
Yeah.
There's lack of learning and development there, and the status quo. Well, we've been doing this for years, you know, so
Hmm.
we're just not going to change it. Or the halo, which is the unconscious bias. That's a big issue. Oh, this manager has been with us for XY years, and you know, his performance, his P&Ls is top notch. I don't question none of his, you know, whatever he or she does, I don't question it because I'm sure he or she knows what he's doing. But what
Yeah.
happens is, you know, when we give so much autonomy to an individual, can create a lot of chaos, and that's what happens, right? People can steal right under your nose, or people get fired for some, you know,
For
EEOC reason.
innuendo. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there's just a lot of chaos and complications. So when we're not doing our job as an HR practitioner, or we're intimidated because we fear that we're going to be frowned into, I say, you know, speak up. And I'm a very outspoken person. When there's something wrong, I look at our policy. I'm like, these policy doesn't make any sense at all. You're more worried about your don't come to work with ripped jeans than, you know, than having a manager making passes at their employees, or, you know, being judgmental in their performance review, or not providing performance review at all. And then at the end of the day, they want to let go their workforce without having any evidence of what happened, any documentation. So there's a lot more than a dress code policy that we need to look at than, you know, and be worried about that. We need to look at learning and development as a strategy, as a structure for growth, and also hold people accountable. And that's what I've learned as an
But
HR
do you, I mean,
practitioner.
does HR hold people accountable? Because that's
A
been my
good
biggest
HR,
issue with
a good
HR.
HR,
You know,
absolutely.
because I've always felt like HR is like the subordinate of management, of senior executives. Like
Where
you guys do what they tell you to do. Like you're in cahoots.
unfortunately, unfortunately, that seems like what it is. And that's why, I mean, let's challenge the status quo. I think that instead of taking orders, which is what the stigma is, you know, taking orders from the leadership team, from the leadership executive team, and saying, you know, we need sexual harassment prevention training. Okay, we're going to check the box. We're going to have to hire more Black people versus white people because we need to show an affirmative action plan.
And
Let's
I
check the
hate that,
box.
Brenda. I hate that. Hire the best talent. Doesn't matter where they're from, you know, and start treating people like human beings. Maybe you'll get more out of them if you did that.
Yeah,
Start promoting the people that should be promoted, that are asking to be promoted.
Yes, I'm a very frustrated individual when it comes to HR. I'm a very
I'm very
frustrated.
critical of HR, you know.
I mean, I can imagine. I imagine. And so
I've had my qualms with them, you know.
so most of my clients, you're fresh of
Yeah.
breath air. Oh my gosh. And I said, why wasn't this happening before? What was going on? And sometimes I
Yeah.
consult with other HR. So there's an HR director on the team. And I work with this individual. I'm like, I'm not here to take your job. Trust me, I will not go behind that desk. Right. And so, but I'm here to work with you. And just to answer one of your questions about HR just taking orders from the leadership team and just doing what we're told, it's because we're not looked at as a business, as a strategic partner to the organization. And that's a big problem. Right.
Exactly. You're training these people. You're training these people.
We're the heartbeat of the organization. We're the eyes and ears of the company. And so the fact that they lack in depending on our feedback and just think that we're just gonna sit down there and take orders is a humongous, costly mistake for any company to do that. And that's why my podcast focuses on, if you're opening up a business, here are some good HR strategies. Here are some good best practices for you to incorporate in your company, whether you've been around for, 6 months or 30 years. These are just good best practices to adopt. Or if you're just an HR practitioner who's trying to navigate the HR world and how to be able to speak to the leadership team, become more assertive, I find more time people come like with blank faces and an empty notebook. Instead of like if you're called in for a meeting, a board meeting, go in with your own agenda too, and have your notes and have like, this is the things I want to talk about. Even if you get to talk about one topic on that list, you came in with a goal in mind. And you need to be able to accomplish at least 2 or 3 things that you wrote down on your list so that the board members or the leadership team can understand where you're coming from and come prepared to show data. Because you're collecting it all the time through different HRIS systems or whatever SaaS technologies you're using, or feedback through, if you're doing surveys, because that's important, do surveys throughout the organization. This is information that they need to hear. Don't be intimidated. You're not going to lose your job. And if you lose your job, they're lost. Go find someone who's going to value you or become a consultant.
There you go. Don't be scared.
Yeah.
Please, HR, don't be scared, man. Because I feel like, come on, man. I've had a situation where, like, I was getting, harassed. It was multiple municipalities working in the same building, and one of the security officers just didn't. And this is when I first started working at that location, right? She brushed up on me and was like physical with me, and I'm like, what's happening right now? I'm like, is this for real? And I let management know what happened. Nothing happened. Oh, don't worry about it. Everything gets slid underneath a rug, and I have an issue with that. But I want to move to a different topic right now. Because go ahead.
Angel,
no, go ahead.
It's such a shame that happened to you, because if it was the other way around, people will be filing paperwork and helping this individual, this person, like if you brushed up against this female, oh, hell breaks loose. So there's such an,
and she did it. It was in a sexual way as well. It was like a physical way, like an intimidating, like, yo, like, who are you? And I'm dressed in a suit with my work ID on, and she's treating me like I'm a criminal. And I worked at Rikers Island before. So I'm like, this is crazy. I never even got treated like this by COs at Rikers Island who deal with people that are a little bit more hostile on a daily basis. And I'm in a suit, and you're doing, and then I reach out to HR and to management, and they're like, oh, we don't believe you.
Yeah.
Essentially is what they said. We don't believe you. And I asked for a transfer. I'm like, I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to see this person because I see him every day. And they were like, oh, no, we don't believe you.
Wow.
You're late a lot. Maybe that's why you're complaining. And I'm like, what?
Wow.
And I don't even. And the thing is, I had satisfactory, which is the highest level you could have gotten at that company with attendance. So I'm like, okay, now this is just fugaziness happening on this management level. They don't, for whatever reason, they want to keep me strapped here. And, it was funny. It was a big stench. And that's why I have such trepidation when HR, they're right sometimes. Don't get me wrong. There's some great I've seen some great HR practitioners. I've had them on the podcast before. But I'm just saying that, I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly of the way HR gets down. Yeah. Now, I want to talk about, sensitivity, because we are living in a world where I think there's people in HR that are trying to be progressive, and there's people in HR that are stuck to conservative ideology. And now we're living in a world where now you're getting Gen Zers in the workforce. Forget about millennials. They're now becoming senior executives. They're moving up in the ranks, and now you're getting these Gen Zers in here, and these kids are brought up differently. They're brought up with the Me Too movement and knowing what that is. Men are probably a little bit more sensitive and know that, if a girl's not hollering at you, you may want to leave that alone. So men may be a little bit more sensitive in the workforce coming in now than they were with millennials and, people, the Generation X before them. So, how is it adapting to that dichotomy and that dynamic?
That's a very good question. So I criticized when Starbucks did the sensitivity training. And the reason why it's good that they did it. I'd rather have some training than no training available, right? But it's how they went about it. And they went through this drastic change of closing down I don't know if you remember, they closed down all of their Starbucks because, we're going through this sensitivity training. And my thought process is like, why did you have to wait for a customer or for an employee to to say something wrong, or something that just didn't mean to go wrong but went wrong. And now you're forced to create awareness around how to communicate with people. Why don't you just create awareness of how to treat people like human beings from the beginning? Right? And then
Yeah, makes
and
sense.
also understand different cultures and different how people respond culturally when taking orders or giving orders. So I just really did not feel good about that. I'm glad that they didn't, and I hope that there was some breakthroughs in that. But how I feel about sensitivity, I think there's a lot to be said with people who are conservative. Like, you don't want to say that. I think that we need to have these hard, difficult questions. And I mean, conversations, excuse me. We need to have these difficult conversations about how we want to be addressed. I had someone on the podcast just the other day. She considers herself Black because she wasn't born in Africa, so she's not African American. And so she made a point where, like someone came to her and said, well, do you want to be considered Black or African American? Don't ever assume how people want to be addressed. Like, don't call, because if I said, oh, check the box, you're African American, this individual might have gotten very offensive about that, right? Because she gave me this whole spiel about, her ethnicity and her history and stuff like that. And she was like, I was born in the US and I'm Black. Right. And so, that's just an example, just to kind of say, don't be afraid to ask questions. Let's look at the LGBTQ community, right?
Yeah.
That's another conversation all in itself when it comes to sensitivity.
Yeah,
And
those trainings be like 25, 30 minutes, 40 minutes. Like, they really go in. If you're like in a real corporation that does those trainings and have those universities, they really break it down,
they
from what I've seen.
do. And what I tell my clients is, let's revisit your application process. Right? Like, why don't we just add a box like, how do you want to be called? Or how do you consider yourself, binary, gay, whatever the case may be. Let's be more inclusive in our application process, in our interview. Don't be calling someone ma'am or sir if that's not how they want to be called. Right. So the government is very good at this, calling people by their last name without even asking, hey, is it okay if I can call you by your last name, or how do you want to be addressed? Right. And so having these conversations, they're not scary topics. These are conversations that everyone should have, feel comfortable asking and talking and addressing. When it comes to, let me see if there's another example. Dress code, for example. That's
I have a
another
big problem with that, man. That was another issue I used to have. Like, skinny jeans aren't baggy jeans. Like, you should be able to wear like this, right? With like some
I love
skinny
your
jeans
jacket,
under
by the way.
and I used to have issues with my supervisor. Why are you wearing jeans to work? I'm like, yo, bro, I look fresher than you. Like, why you didn't iron your suit? Let's talk about that. Like, like, I just didn't belong there.
Yeah. Yeah, you're very progressive, but I love your style. I love
I'm
the
extremely
jacket.
progressive, I guess you can. But then I also have my conservative ideals. It all depends on the situation.
I think that we need to get out of the old ways of doing business, which was suit and tie. So,
Yeah.
for example, for us women back in the day, if we didn't wear a suit, we didn't fit in the boardroom. Right. And so that was kind of difficult. I hate suits. I didn't like suits at all. I felt like if I was, stuck or too hot, and not mean in a sexual context, it was just like choking in a suit.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah,
I would
burning
wear
up.
it was just horrible. It was uncomfortable. It was counterproductive. I wasn't productive at my work because I was more focused on this tight suit that I was wearing, or this discomfort, or because I have a curvy body, who else is checking me out? So I was very conscious about all these things, and it was very, very uncomfortable to go into work like this, because you're going to get those looks, you're going to get that whistle, unfortunately. So we have to train. Part of that sensitivity training is to let people know what other people are feeling, even though they're not saying it. So when I do my sexual harassment prevention training, I talk about these things. I hate walking past a construction site. I feel uncomfortable wearing certain clothes around certain people because of the way they look. So it's important for people to be able to speak up and having these conversations. Hey, can I help you? Is there something that is causing you to look at me the way you're doing? Because honestly, it makes me uncomfortable. Because remember, it's how the person feels and respond to it.
Yeah.
It's really where the cause of the matter is and the concerns lie. And so, and if it's repetitive, it's a harassment situation.
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, look, you have to. It's kind of hard, I would imagine, as an HR uh, practitioner when to hire people and know how they're gonna react around people that they think are beautiful. But also, if you're in that kind of surrounding, you need to learn how to be, subtle or, just politically correct about the situation in the workplace. Like, let's say you do vibe with somebody at work, you know? How would you suggest to act around them? Vice,
Vibe in a
women to man, man
way,
to women, gay, straight, lesbian, doesn't matter.
vibe in a way. So you have to be very careful in how you vibe with other people, right? Because not
Yeah,
everybody's going to be your friend. Because there's gonna
exactly.
be there's gonna be a time, and so part of human resources, my favorite part is employee relations.
Oof.
Because yeah, it's really where I get to
Let's
learn a
talk about it.
lot.
Let's talk about it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really where I get to learn about the reasons why people respond and act a certain way, and then I become very analytical and critical thinker. Like, this is interesting. So how, employee relations, when it comes to a dress code or how people are vibing with each other, there's always going to come a point where you're going to tell your friend, quote, I'm putting air quotes, your friend something to do because suddenly you become their superior throughout the organization, right? Because things change, you got promoted. Now your friend is it's inferior to your position. So you're telling them
Yeah,
what to
she's
do
your
and how to,
or he or she
as
or
a
it is
subordinate.
your subordinate.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And so suddenly your friend is not taking well by the instruction. So now there's insubordination and how you handle that and how you respond to that. And so in certain situations, and you find like you're about to be leveled up into a leadership team, I think it's always important to restructure the dynamic of that group, because you're going to run in situations. However, if you are assertive enough and have set the example of you being a very authentic leader, a transparent leader, a leader that people can respect with, you're an ethical leader. People, no matter whether they're your friends or not, or someone who's way younger or older than you are, because you're going to find very young leaders who older generations are going to report to this person. So there's going to be some dichotomy in that too, but it's really how you present yourself, your demeanor. And if as a leader, if you're not self-aware of how you're going to respond to certain behaviors, it's important to understand what are those triggers. And so when you're surrounded by those triggers, how you're going to respond to it, because you can't react. You can't yell at your team. You can't yell at your friend, or you can't start arguing or being sneaky behind your friend and saying and causing them problems. Oh yeah, they're the one that came late because blah 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 blah. This is what they did. So whatever the case may be, you have to have some self-awareness to be able to know what your triggers are. Because if you're not aware of what your triggers are, you're going to run into situations. You're going to run into bad communication issues, conflicts at work, employee relations matter that could take you potentially to court, right? So you're going to run into a lot of litigious situations if you're not aware of some of those triggers and how people respond. Get to know people, get to know how they react or think. It's important as a leader, as a human being, to know who your peers are, and also to differentiate what is friendship at work and what is not. And that's a big thing, because I feel that people who work, you're spending so much time at work with the same people, what, 8 to 10 hours a day. You develop
Yeah.
these bonds and relationships, but there's going to come a time where that dynamic is going to change. I'm no longer just your friend, but now I'm your manager.
Yeah.
Or I'm no longer just your friend or a coworker, I'm your boyfriend, girlfriend, right? Whatever
Yeah.
the case may be, you have to figure out, a course of action, some lay out ground rules, lay out some boundaries, which is very important. I feel like these problems are caused because of lack of boundaries and communication. Um, there's just, I mean, the list can go on and on, in terms of,
Yeah, no,
when
that
you're,
that was like my biggest issue, to be honest with you, because I'm the type, I don't want to speak to you. I don't trust my coworkers. I never have. I'll be completely honest with you. We're coworkers. It was easier for me in the restaurant industry because there, like, I was a bartender, right, for a really long time. So there, if my waiters and waitresses are making money and doing their thing, I'm making money and doing my thing because they got to tip me out at the end of the day. So I got to make sure that I'm working for them as hard as they're working for me because it works. It's it's that incentive. In that corporate life and that structure, to me, people will backstab you just because they had a bad week with their boyfriend. The next thing you know, it's like a whole huge issue and you're fired 2 months down the line because they knew too much about you. That's why I never like to get close to people. But then that's also an issue too because you're comfortable not speaking to anybody, so then everybody wants to make you that weirdo and talk about you behind your back, and that's another issue. So it's like, it's so hard. The politics of that corporate life is something that I don't know if HR teaches, but it's something that, I mean, I would imagine you guys make new hires aware of because that can really go left at any second.
so I would have to say that being an HR practitioner for a long time, I've
Yeah.
never had a conversation like that with anyone. I think this is just unspoken rules that you need to come to understand, right? Look
Hmm.
out for yourself, but you also have to learn how to collaborate and be able to work with others. So that we teach,
Yeah.
that we emphasize, be a team player. But we can't control who you want to be friends with, and we can't control who you're going to trust. You have to make those decisions as an adult and as a human
Yeah.
being for yourself.
Yeah.
If they were coming to one of my trainings, I mean, I'll have a sidebar, by the way, be careful who you share information with, because if you're working for a large corporation, chances
Yeah.
are promotions are much higher than a smaller company, right? And
Yeah.
then, you're climbing up the ladder and then your peers are like kind of behind you. And then they're suddenly say, oh, mira, él, look at him. He thinks he's big, and Big Shot, Mr. Big Shot is walking around thinking
Yeah.
that he got promoted and now he's making the big bucks. No, they start talking about you, creating gossip. So I, I, um, under the sensitivity training, leadership and development, there's a topic that I talk about, and it's gossip, workplace
Hmm.
gossip, and
Oh, good Lord.
that's something that's not spoken of, though. It is
Well,
not.
no, I'm just saying. I think that's a great idea. Thank
It
you,
is.
Brenda, for bringing that up because that
It.
can lead to a shit show. I mean, pardon my
But let
language,
me
but
tell you,
it's
a
crazy.
lot of the
Yeah.
insecurities do starts from what's in your head, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so because you
Mm-hmm.
start assuming, oh, I just got promoted, so my peers are not going to look at me the same. They think I'm going to be Mr. or Mrs. Big Shot, right? And
Yeah.
so we start creating our own insecurities and start believing them. So we also have to be mindful what we think. And before we make them into a reality, because sometimes what we think is not always what the situation is, and that happens a
Facts.
lot, happens more often than you think. And so we have to be very mindful as to what we're feeding our brain and how we're physically responding to that, right? Our actions. And so, while that's a conversation, not a training module, it's just a conversation through different opportunities whenever you can, maybe throw out some, emails. How are you treating your peers today? Did you ask if they needed help? Send out an email chain that talks about how would you become a better business partner to your associate or whatever. This is going to create a culture of, being sensitive to other people's needs, being respectful of people's time, being aware that people are busy and they're not going to respond to your email right away. So don't get emotional if they're not going to respond to you. So don't start sending a big all caps
Yeah.
and a whole bunch of exclamation mark. So, in one of my clients in Maryland, I taught emotional intelligence, and I'm a big
There you
proponent
go.
of
You hit the
emotional
nail
intelligence.
right on the head. Emotional intelligence.
Yeah,
It's hard to teach and it's hard to adapt to. The
it
art of
is.
remaining calm, it's a beautiful thing. I love it. Speak on it. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't mean
yeah.
to.
No. So
You got me excited. I love that word, man.
my first company,
That
my
phrase,
first
yeah.
company, which is still, thank God, it's been knock on wood, developing, which is the podcast, the extension of Ignite, Mentor, Empower Chief Talent Officer, is called Impacto EQ, and EQ
Hmm.
means emotional intelligence, or as people will call it differently, not IQ, oh my God, EI. EI. So you see the initials EI. I call it EQ.
Yeah.
Um, and so Impacto EQ, we develop different modules that has emotional intelligence components to it. So when it comes to leadership development, one of the first exercises that we go through is remember a time where you responded to an email in a frustrated tone. What was the reason behind that? What was the cause behind that? And so, when you walking through these exercises, and then you start giving them different case scenarios, they realize, oh my gosh, I can't believe I've been doing this all this time. And then we talk about triggers. What was the most frustrating experience you ever had, and how did you respond to that? Or what was the most frustrating experience you had because someone treated you incorrectly? What was your response to that? And so there's just so many exercises, throughout my emotional intelligence program, where you're able to understand different reasons. And again, it's all in the head. Sometimes, our mind really play dirty tricks on us. And then we
Yeah.
start communicating them in such unprofessional tones. We go over emails, conversation, texting, right? We talk about tone, the tone that we put in versus the tone that the sender is sending. So we talk about sender receiving messaging. So there's just a lot with regards to emotional intelligence, and self-awareness is a big one, as well as feedback, constructive criticism. It's important to be able to give them. People are quick to give feedback, but they are terrible in receiving feedback.
I would say a lot of people are. I would say
And
that's like 89% of
I,
the
I,
population.
I would say
Don't
that's
let it
quite
get to your
accurate.
head now. You need to practice that.
So, when I get
Yeah.
to that point of, the presentation,
Hmm.
talk to the person next to you, and, ask for, list three top things that, they can find that you need improvement in, and list three top things that you're great at. And so
Hmm.
you're creating this dialogue of feedback. And then, if you're sitting next to a friend, be careful, because sometimes they'll say, oh, you're great, I find no fault in you. Move to another chair, move to another, because you're not going to get something organic. You need
Yeah.
constructive criticism. And I
And that
think
helps
any
management
feedback.
too. I would imagine that helps their managers, put them in
Oh,
positions to
yes.
win.
So this company is a construction organization that had different types of departments, and they worked in silos, but they needed to work together and collaborate. But what happens when you work in silos? You don't know what the other hand is doing. And so when you eventually figure out, oh, you did this, but the client wanted this, and blah, 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 you're going to create such communication issues and dichotomy within that department that the client is going to suffer because y'all couldn't get it together. Right. And so we
Yeah.
need to be able to collaborate. We need to be able to speak up. There are things that require more than just an email. Walk over to the cubicle or pick up the phone and say something. So there's just a lot of stuff that we cover in emotional intelligence, and the exercises are real. I mean, we use real case scenarios, client conversation, internal email conversations where people add their own tone and it really wasn't addressed that way, but that's how you took it, instead of picking up your phone and trying to figure out what the other person was trying to say. So there's just a lot that goes on with that. And I love emotional intelligence because of that.
Well, you know what time it is. It is time, everyone, for 5 words with Angel. All right, Brenda, on 5 words with Angel. We're back with it. We're going to give you a phrase, a word or a phrase, a question. You're going to give us the first thought that comes to your head. Are you ready?
I hope so.
All right. I'm gonna take it easy on you with the first word. The first word is human resources.
Put back human and human resources. Treat people like human beings. Shoot.
The second word is diversity.
It's necessary. It's necessary to expand your knowledge and your awareness on different cultures. It's important to grow.
Right. No, it's true. I agree. I mean, we gotta grow. We gotta try and inspire ourselves to grow every day.
Can we get along? It will lessen these protesting or these rioting that's been happening. I mean, we're going through what is it? A social uproar right now because of because of ignorance. I'll just put it that way.
Well, talking of that, my third word is Rush Limbaugh. Your boy.
Oh no, he's not my boy. He's not my boy. Let's just keep it here. I think that may he rest in peace. By the way,
yes.
He passed just recently.
We will not speak ill of the dead on the Angel of Words podcast.
No, I know why you said that. So Rush Limbaugh, I actually started listening to him when I first moved to Washington D.C. back in 2002. He was a radio
shock jock. He was that guy back then. He was up there with like Howard Stern and them boys.
Right. And Howard Stern, he's very controversial. Howard Stern is very controversial, but he was doing his thing, and I also looked at Howard Stern. Now I didn't look up to him, of course, because there was just a lot of stuff that was like, what's wrong with you, dude? But,
well, he's actually right behind me. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
He's here somewhere. You'll see him on other podcasts.
But you know what I love about this, right?
Call.
But but what I love about these two individuals we just mentioned is that they speak their mind and they don't give a crap about what people are saying. They speak their mind. Now, what I do care is how you get your information, how you deliver your information, right? And that was one of the things that that was very troubling for me with Rush Limbaugh, that although he spoke his mind, he was very outspoken what he thought about his own conservatism, right, and his ideologies with conservatism. He was anti-feminist, and he was, and that's not my ideology, but I just appreciated the fact. I mean, he had how many? More than 14 million listeners, or I think I'm a little off with that number. But
but to me, it's always easy to get listeners when you're being negative and
people like drama.
You're catering. Yeah, exactly.
People like
it's
drama.
Easy to do that. I'm telling you, if I did a podcast on that, baby, I'd probably be the hottest podcaster right now. But I'm not doing that.
You are.
It's not gonna help my community. I always said I'm taking the high road if I'm gonna do this. You know what I'm saying?
And that, and I really respect that and I appreciate that. I mean, the things that I love about people is how they're assertive without not giving a cahoot about whatever people think. But going back to sensitivity, you also have to be sensitive to other people's to the political aspects, to the emotional aspect, to the human being aspect of it. And that's what they lacked of. And when I mean they, I'm just want to focus on Rush Limbaugh. So I just admire the way he was and expressed himself. Not necessarily the content of what he expressed or the context around it, but just how he was as a podcaster, pretty much.
He's a radio icon, whether you want to admit it or not. Those are the facts of life.
But controversy is good. Having controversial conversations is very good. Just think about it.
We just had one. Now, but we're not done with 5 words with Angel. Don't try to escape. The 4th word is gender equality.
Oh, man, women, men, gays, lesbians,
come together.
We gotta rise up and come together and really challenge yourself to because there's a big pot of gold out there for everyone, and we're letting pardon what I'm about to say, but I'm gonna unapologetic white men are taking over that. And I have a very close friend of mine who says, we gotta think like white men. And I'm like, can we just think about how we can be as aggressive and more progressive than them? Because there's just a big pot of gold out there to be reached and we deserve it. But we gotta work hard. We gotta look at our counterparts and how they go by, their career path. They're the ones that are staying later in the office. They're the ones that are coming very early. They're the ones that are going to school. They're the ones that are reading books. They're the ones that are doing everything they can to become advantageous against their competitors, because we have the same advantage. But we got to really speak up and be assertive in that boardroom and demand more. Not because we just deserve a raise, but because we want it, we need it, we deserve it. We have so many reasons why we need to get paid like our counterparts.
Well, just like you said stop being humble, stop being modest, get after it. If you're gonna be in that job, get after that promotion, go after it, say something,
get
speak
after
up.
it, get after
Rise
it.
up, HR, you know?
Rise up, HR, absolutely. Rise up the human element in you and speak up what's your truth, and don't be afraid. And if they don't appreciate it, go on to the next.
I hear that. Number 5, last but not least, Project Hire, Impacto EQ.
I love Project Hire, which is still a project. So Project Hire is helping to increase retention in entrepreneurship. It really focuses on our military men and women who are transitioning from, the military life to civilian life, and helping our supportive spouses to find resiliency through and sustainability through entrepreneurship. Either whether that's franchise or career path in corporate America. We do learning and development, which is I help other veterans who are transitioning from whatever course of military career they're in, and helping them with their resume, interviewing techniques, and so many things that falls under in finding a job. So it's something. So whoever needs to support it, please, because it's not a nonprofit, but we definitely need all the support. We need volunteers. I need more job readiness trainers to volunteer for this, and understand that you're really giving back to the community.
Plug it. Right now we're talking to Brenda Sabater, host of Rise Up HR on all your podcast platforms. And, actually, Brenda, plug everything you need to plug before we end the podcast here.
Thank you so much. So you can find me on IG, on Instagram. So #riseup_HR. You could also find me on LinkedIn, Brenda Sabater. You can send me a quick, I don't have where you have to put in your email anymore. So you can just request me, send me a quick email, let me know why we're connecting. So it's just, give me a reason to accept you. And then you can also send me an email to connect@riseuphr.net. And if you want to be a volunteer for Project Hire, by all means, let me know that on the subject line, because I'm looking for volunteers. I can't do this all on my own. It's a team effort. It's a collaboration, and it's for the better good for our veterans who fought for our freedom. So I'm excited about that. And it's not only for veterans, but also for college students who are transitioning. And I come with a history of helping ex-offenders find work. So it's also for those folks who are re-entering into society, who are finding a better, resilient career path.
Wow, that's what's up, man. Everyone, that was Brenda Sabater. Thank you for joining us on the Angel of Words podcast. Don't forget you're welcome. Don't forget, smash that like button, subscribe, follow me, the Angel of Words podcast, on all podcast platforms, social media at Angel of Words ENT. And if you want to leave a donation to the podcast, Cash App AOWNYC. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. We'll talk to you later.